Hey everyone, welcome back to another late night dive into Reddit's creepiest corners. Today's lineup is disturbing, shocking, so grab a drink, grab a snack, get comfy, and let's get into these twisted Reddit stories. Oh, and if you enjoy these stories, smash that like button and subscribe. You don't want to miss what's coming next. I found a hidden door in my basement. I wish I had never opened it. I've lived in my house for 5 years. It's an old place, built in the early 1990s. With all the charm and creaks you'd expect from a century-old home. The basement has always freaked me out a bit. It's cold, damp, and smells faintly of mildew, but I'd never paid it much attention beyond the occasional trip to store boxes or grab tools. Until last week. I was moving some old furniture when I noticed a draft. At first, I thought it was just the basement being drafty as usual, but then I realized it was coming from behind one of the shelves. The air was colder, almost icy. Curious, I pulled the shelf away from the wall, and that's when I saw it. A small wooden door, barely taller than a crawlspace hatch, covered in peeling paint. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't on the house inspection report when I bought the place, and I had never noticed it before. It had no handle, just a keyhole. I should have stopped there. I should have walked away, but I didn't. Instead, I grabbed my toolbox, picked the lock. Thank you, YouTube tutorials. And swung the door open. Behind it was a narrow stone staircase, spiraling down into darkness. The air that rushed out smelled wrong, damp, metallic, and faintly sweet, like rotting fruit. Against every ounce of better judgment, I grabbed a flashlight and started descending. The steps felt endless. The farther I went, the more the walls seemed to close in. When I finally reached the bottom, I found myself in a small, circular chamber made of smooth stone. In the center was a well. It looked ancient, the edges worn smooth as if by centuries of use. Here's where it gets weird. As I shined my flashlight around, I noticed something scratched into the walls. Words. Over and over, the same phrase, "Do not look down." I backed away from the well, heart pounding, but then I heard it. A soft, wet sound, like something shifting in. The water. My flashlight flickered, and in the brief darkness, I swear I heard a whisper faint, like it was coming from miles below. Help me. I should have run. I should have bolted back up the stairs and sealed the door forever. But something about that voice, it didn't sound threatening. It sounded desperate. Against my better judgment, I leaned over the well and aimed my flashlight down. The beam barely reached the water. It was black and still, reflecting nothing. But as I stared, the surface began to ripple. Slowly, something started to rise. At first, I thought it was a person. A head, pale and smooth, breaking the surface. Then I saw the eyes round, lidless, and too large for its face. Its mouth was wide, filled with needle-like teeth, and it was smiling. The whisper came again, louder this time. Help me. I don't remember running back up the stairs. I don't remember sealing the door or pushing the shelf back in place. But I must have, because when I came to, I was sitting on my kitchen floor, shaking, the basement door locked tight. Since then, I've heard noises at night. Soft scratching, like something trying to find its way out. Last night, I found muddy footprints leading from the basement door to my bed. I haven't been back down there. I don't think I ever will. But the scratches are getting louder, and I can't help but notice they're starting to sound like words. Help me. My ex-girlfriend went missing 10 years ago. Today, I might have found some evidence as to what happened. So, my ex-girlfriend went missing almost 10 years ago. Last time she was seen, she was in a red dress, on her way to a party in Cluj-Napoca in a red 1999 Fiat Seicento S with the license plate CJ96TAT. On that day, she left to go to the party, but never arrived, and was later declared missing. Today, on my way back from work, I stopped to check up on one of my aunts and uncles whom I haven't seen in a while. Now, since I was a teenager, I collected license plates. I didn't steal them from cars on the street. I just took them off scrap cars. My uncle said, "While I went out fishing a few days ago, I found this in the river," and gave me a rusty old license plate he found in the river. And guess what? The plate text was CJ96TAT, the same as my ex-girlfriend's car. What I think happened is that on that day, she might have lost control of the car and crashed in the Somesh River. I'm not 100% sure of this. Update: So after I reported it, they started searching the Somesh River for any evidence of a red Fiat Seicento. They found the car in the river, all bashed up, as if it rolled over before ending up in the river, with the driver's door open and no human remains inside the car. Everyone's theory is that since she might have lost control of the car, rolled over, and landed in the river, and managed to escape the car, while trying to flag down another motorist for help, her purse and phone were still in the car, she got kidnapped and most probably raped and killed. The police are still working on the case, however. Update 2. The case has gone cold again. The police said that she is definitely dead and either drowned in her escape from the car or got kidnapped while trying to flag down another motorist. Either way, she is most likely dead, and there is no way to find her body after 10 years. I inherited my grandmother's lakeside house, but she never properly warned me. My grandmother, when she was alive, lived on an old farm on the side of a hill in a remote village in northern Sweden, right next to a beautiful lake surrounded by mountains. Whenever we were there, we would spend all day swimming or fishing for perch and crayfish. Grandmother was, however, always very assertive that we must never get out on the lake during the night, though she never gave us any reason. I always assumed she worried that something would happen while no one was around to help. Of course, time passes, and last year so did my grandmother. My grandfather died when I was very young, so my grandmother's passing left the house empty, and neither my mother nor any of her siblings were interested in moving out to the middle of nowhere. I, on the other hand, work remotely most of the time, and even though I don't really expect to work the land, the solitude sounded quite appealing. Along with the house itself, I inherited furniture, a tractor, some old farming equipment, and, of course, the small wooden rowing boat we would use whenever we were visiting. I have a single neighbor, a strange old man named Lennart, who lives in a small cottage further up the hill across the road from me. He mostly likes to keep to himself, but I have offered to let him use the boat if he wants to do some fishing and to help out with clearing snow during the winter. One night, after I had finally settled in and was mostly unpacked, I stood by the window in my bedroom looking out over the lake. The moon was peeking out over the mountain opposite and cast a beautiful glow on the still water. Suddenly, I was reminded of my grandmother's warnings not to go out on the lake during the night. Curiosity got the better of me, and I made my way down to the boathouse. As I made my way down to the lake, I heard footsteps and a voice calling out behind me. Startled, I turned around to see Lennart. He seemed flustered and asked me, almost accusingly, why I was going down to the boathouse at this hour. Confused and a little annoyed at his sudden intrusion, I told him that I felt like taking the boat out for a little midnight trip since this was such a beautiful night. He insisted that going out on the lake during the night was unsafe. Had my grandmother not warned me? In hindsight, I feel extremely childish about this, but his insistence just made me more motivated. I told him that I was fully aware of the risks of taking a boat out at night, but that I was a grown adult and capable of making my own decisions. Lennart grumbled, and I could tell that he was still very agitated, but he relented and, with a grunt and a dismissive wave, started making his way back up the hill. I pushed my boat out on the water and jumped in. The water was very still, and the combination of the moonlight and almost complete absence of any sounds made for an incredibly soothing experience. I settled around the middle of the lake, perhaps 300 meters from the shore. At this point, I could see most of the houses in the village, and the neighboring village. Looking over toward my house, I suddenly realized that Lennart's cottage was entirely dark. He usually had some lights on in the windows, so that was certainly odd, but I could only assume that he had blown a fuse. Around me, the stillness of the water was disturbed by bubbles. Before I knew it, the water was filled with frenzied activity, and with a lurch, the boat suddenly started moving back toward the shore. I was moving significantly faster than my rowing had taken me out onto the lake, and I was holding on for dear life. I worried I would crash into the boathouse, but whatever pushed my boat along navigated it safely back to the spot where I would normally keep it moored, and it slid softly back onto land. I stood up, scared and confused, and looked around. 3 dark and bloated silhouettes emerged from the water. In the moonlight, they looked almost like soldiers in ghillie suits, but they clearly wore no diving equipment. They approached swiftly and grabbed me. The creatures smelled vaguely of fish and decaying vegetation, and they spoke in a language I could not comprehend. I managed to make out a single word that was repeated multiple times. Mermelgard. They dragged me inside the boathouse. One of them looked me dead into the eyes and covered my mouth as it made a gargled, hushing sound. Its face was clearly not human, with bulging eyes without eyelids, 2 slits in place of a nose, and no visible ears. I realized it was in fact not wearing anything. However, its leathery dark brown skin seemed to mimic the appearance of decaying leaves. Of course, I was scared nearly out of my mind at this point, but for some reason I didn't attempt to flee. The creature seemed almost as scared as I was. So, I complied and kept quiet. They turned off the lights and settled down around me. We waited in there for what felt like an eternity, but was most likely only a couple of minutes. The silence outside was suddenly broken by a loud splash and the sound of wood splintering. I could hear that something was emerging from the lake, followed by heavy, damp footsteps. From what I could tell, it seemed to be moving up the hill as the footsteps were getting more and more distant. As I sat in that boathouse, my senses tuned to max by all of the adrenaline coursing through my body, the sounds of breaking glass and splintering wood reached us. Eventually, the footsteps returned, and whatever had come after us out of the lake made its way back into the water. A couple of minutes later, the 3 creatures that brought me into the boathouse quietly exchanged a few words. The one who had hushed me earlier gestured that I was free to leave, and then they left. I could hear them going back into the water. I fell back against the wall and slid down to the floor as my adrenaline abated and the fear truly set in. I didn't move from that spot until the following morning. My house looked like a crime scene. The front door, along with its frame, had been torn out of the wall and lay several meters away on my lawn. Most of my windows and furniture were in pieces, and pools of water dotted the floor throughout the house. Lennart clearly knew more about the creatures that live in the lake. I resented that he hadn't been more forceful in stopping me from going out with the boat. However, logically, I knew I wouldn't have believed him if he had started going on about monsters, and what was he supposed to do? Nevertheless, I marched over to his cottage and banged on the door until he eventually opened it. He seemed both surprised and relieved that I was standing there, and he offered me a cup of coffee and an explanation. The lake is inhabited by a creature known as Mermelgard, and creatures known as the Vatnora. Generally, they live together in peace, but they have very different opinions on us humans. Leonard and my grandmother used to spend time with the Vatnora, and they understood some of their language. Their word for human roughly translates as foolish ones. They say that humanity are not mature, and they mostly settle with observing us. Mermelgard is an ancient creature that sleeps during the day and hunts at night. He is resentful of humanity for settling around his lake, eating his fish, and disturbing the darkness of the night with artificial lights. I still live in my grandmother's old house. Leonard has promised to introduce me to the Vatnora in their own time. I feel an obligation to thank them and to protect others from Mermelgard. I will never go out on the lake during the night again, but I feel strangely safe to do so during the day. Thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate every single one of you. If you haven't already, please give the video a like and hit that subscribe button. We're aiming for 1,000 subscribers, and I know we can get there soon with your support.